Hey there, how's it going? Thanks for joining me today. Whether you're relaxing at home, on your commute, or winding down for the evening, I'm really glad you're here. So, let me ask you something. When you think about evolution, what comes to mind? Probably something like Darwin's finches, right? Maybe some dusty textbook diagrams of apes slowly standing upright. Here's the thing though, and this is going to blow your mind. Evolution didn't stop when humans showed up. In fact, it's been running in overdrive mode, and right now, as you're listening to this, it's happening inside your body at speeds that would make a Formula One driver jealous. Picture this. January 15th, 2009. A geneticist named Sarah Tishkoff is standing in a small village in Tanzania, the African sun beating down on her shoulders. She's drawing blood samples from the local people, probably thinking she's just adding another data point to what scientists already know about human lactose. Tolerance. You know, that ability some of us have to drink milk without getting sick. Now, here's what everyone thought they knew at the time. Europeans developed lactose tolerance around 7,000 years ago when they started farming cattle. Makes sense, right? If you're going to live alongside cows, it's pretty handy to be able to drink their milk without your stomach staging a full-scale rebellion. Scientists figured this was a done deal, a neat little evolutionary story with a beginning, middle and end. But Sarah Tishkoff was about to discover something that would shatter a century of assumptions. Within months of analyzing those blood samples, her team made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. These East African populations, the very people she'd met in that Tanzanian village, had evolved lactose tolerance completely independently from Europeans. And here's the kicker. It happened just 3,000 years ago. 3,000 years. That's practically yesterday in evolutionary terms. Think about that for a second. While your great-great-great-great and so on grandparents were living in what we consider ancient history, evolution was busy rewiring the genetics of entire populations. And it wasn't just any old genetic change. This mutation spread through the population 40% faster than any prehistoric change scientists had ever documented. You're not going to believe this next part. Right now, inside your body, evolution's engine is running at Formula One speeds. Every single human generation, AGA, and I mean everyone, shows up with about 60 new mutations. 60! That means you're carrying genetic changes that your grandparents don't have, and your kids will carry changes that you don't have. But wait, it gets wilder. Let me tell you about the Bajau people of Southeast Asia. These folks have been living on the water for over 1,000 years, diving for fish and sea cucumbers to survive. And evolution? Well, evolution took notice. The Bajau people have developed spleens that are 50% larger than yours or mine. 50%. That might not sound like much until you realize what it means. They can hold their breath underwater for 13 minutes straight. 13 minutes. Most of us start panicking after about 30 seconds. Their enlarged spleens act like biological scuba tanks, storing extra red blood cells that get released when they dive. It's like evolution looked at their lifestyle and said, you know what, let me help you out with that. And if you think that's impressive, wait until you hear about what happened in Tibet. Picture the highest plateau on Earth, where the air is so thin that most of us would be gasping like fish out of water. For most humans, living at that altitude is like trying to breathe through a straw. But Tibetans, they're running marathons up there like it's a casual jog in the park. Here's the crazy part. They evolved a turbocharged blood oxygen system in just 3,000 years. 3,000 years! That's evolution's fastest documented change in human history. Their bodies produce way more red blood cells than ours, and they've got genetic mutations that help them process oxygen more efficiently. Evolution basically gave them a biological upgrade to deal with their environment. Now, I know what you're thinking. These are probably just isolated examples, right? Special cases that don't really apply to the rest of us? Wrong. Evolution is happening everywhere, all the time, and in ways that would absolutely astound you. In cities around the world, urban living is literally reshaping human brains. Walk through London, Tokyo, or New York, and you're witnessing evolution's laboratory in action. City dwellers' brains now show enlarged areas for processing noise and navigation. We're talking about changes that are visible in just 2 generations. 2 generations. Your brain might already be different from your grandmother's in ways that help you navigate the urban jungle. But here comes the real plot twist, the one that changes everything we thought we knew about human development. Technology hasn't stopped evolution. It's thrown gasoline on the fire. For millions of years, humans evolved slowly, adapting to natural environments over thousands of generations. But now we're creating new environments faster than evolution has ever had to respond. We've got people living in space stations, diving to the deepest parts of the ocean, and spending their entire lives staring at glowing screens. Evolution is scrambling to keep up, and the results are absolutely fascinating. Take the DEC2 gene mutation, discovered in 2009. Some families carry this genetic variant that allows them to thrive on just 4 hours of sleep. 4 hours. While the rest of us are zombie walking through our mornings after getting 7 hours, these people are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed after what most all of us would consider a nap. Scientists think this mutation emerged recently, possibly as a response to our increasingly busy, always-on modern lifestyle. Evolution literally said, "You want to stay up late and wake up early? Here, let me help you with that." And it's not just about staying awake. In West Africa, about 1 in 10 people carry genes that completely block HIV infection. 1 in 10. These genetic variants are spreading through populations as a direct response to the AIDS epidemic. Evolution is actively working to protect future generations from a disease that didn't even exist a century ago. But evolution isn't just adding new abilities, it's also taking things away, and this is where it gets really interesting. We're losing our wisdom teeth. 35% of people now never grow them at all. Our jaws are shrinking, which sounds harmless until you realize it's causing an epidemic of breathing problems and sleep apnea. Why is this happening? Some scientists think it's because we've changed what we eat. Our food is softer now, more processed. We don't need those massive grinding teeth and powerful jaws that our ancestors used to tear apart tough, fibrous foods. Evolution is basically saying, you don't use it, you lose it. But here's something that'll really make you scratch your head. Human body temperature has mysteriously dropped 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit since the 1800s. Nobody knows exactly why, but it's happening everywhere scientists look. Are we becoming more efficient at using energy? Is it related to changes in our gut bacteria? Is our metabolism shifting? The jury's still out, but the fact that it's happening at all shows just how active evolution remains. And then there's the Framingham study, one of the longest-running health studies in history. Researchers have been tracking families in Framingham, Massachusetts since 1948, 70-plus years of data, following the same families, through generation after generation. And you know what they've discovered? The women in this study are evolving, right before scientists' eyes. Over just 3 generations, these women are becoming shorter and stouter, with later menopause. It's not lifestyle, it's genetic. Evolution is literally selecting for women who have certain traits, and those traits are becoming more common with each generation. Let me put this in perspective for you. Evolution used to be something we studied in fossils, something that happened to our ancient ancestors over millions of years. But now we're watching it happen in real time, in living populations, sometimes within a single human lifetime. Here's what really gets me excited about all this. We're living through what might be the most dramatic period of human evolution in our species' history. Think about it. In just the last century, we've gone from riding horses to landing on the moon. We've created environments that have never existed before: sterile hospitals, air-conditioned offices, cities with millions of people, spaces where the sun never shines, and others where artificial light never dims. Evolution is responding to all of it, and the pace is accelerating. The changes that took our ancestors thousands of years are now happening in hundreds of years, sometimes decades. We're witnessing evolution in fast forward, and we're not just passive observers, we're active participants. Every choice you make, every environment you live in, every challenge you face, is potentially shaping the future of human evolution. The altitude you live at, the foods you eat, the diseases you're exposed to, even the types of stress you experience, all of it feeds into the grand evolutionary experiment that is modern humanity. But here's the thing that really blows my mind. We're just at the beginning of this story. Climate change is about to throw evolution a whole new set of challenges. Rising sea levels, changing weather, patterns, new diseases, different food sources, evolution will respond to all of it. Populations living near rising seas might develop better salt processing abilities. Those in expanding deserts could evolve more efficient water retention. People dealing with new infectious diseases will develop genetic resistances we can't even imagine yet. And then there's technology. Brain-computer interfaces are coming, probably sooner than you think. What happens when humans start directly interfacing with machines? What new evolutionary pressures will that create? What new abilities might we develop? The wild card in all of this: we're becoming conscious participants in our own evolution. For the first time in Earth's history, a species understands evolution well enough to potentially direct it. We've got CRISPR gene editing, genetic therapy, and tools that are getting more powerful every year. We're approaching a point where we might be able to choose our evolutionary path instead of just responding to it. Picture this. By 2100, there could be humans living on Mars. Mars! They'll be dealing with gravity that's 3.7 times weaker than Earth's. Within 10 generations, or so, that's just a few hundred years, their bones will likely thicken to deal with the different gravitational stress. Their hearts might shrink because they won't need to pump blood as hard. Their blood could carry more oxygen to deal with the thinner atmosphere. We could be looking at the beginning of genuine human subspecies, each adapted to their specific environment. Martians, deep-sea dwellers, high-altitude populations, Arctic communities, desert peoples, all potentially developing along different evolutionary paths. And that's just the natural stuff. What about the conscious choices we'll make? Parents might soon be able to choose their children's traits like options on a car: enhanced intelligence, disease resistance, physical abilities, even aesthetic preferences. We could literally design our descendants. The question isn't whether human evolution will continue. It absolutely will, probably faster than ever. The question is, what will we choose to become? Think about that as we dig deeper into this incredible story. Evolution isn't just our past, it's our present and our future. It's happening right now, inside your body, inside your community, across our entire species. And for the first time in nearly 4 billion years of life on Earth, the species driving evolution knows it's driving evolution. That might be the most remarkable development in the history of life itself. But to really understand where we're going, we need to understand how we got here. We need to go back to the very beginning, to the 4 billion year setup that made all of this possible. Because the story of human evolution isn't just about humans, it's about life itself, and how a series of incredible accidents and innovations led to creatures capable of reshaping their own genetic destiny. And that's exactly where we're headed next. So here we are, about to take the ultimate journey back in time. And I mean ultimate. We're going back 4 billion years. 4 billion! That's so far back that if you tried to count the seconds since then, you'd be counting for longer than humans have existed. Picture Earth 4 billion years ago. Forget everything you know about our blue marble floating in space. This planet was absolutely nothing like the world you wake up to every morning. No grass, no trees, no animals, no oxygen in the atmosphere. Just a violent, steaming hellscape of volcanic eruptions, meteor impacts, and toxic gases. The oceans weren't blue, they were orange and red from all the iron and sulfur compounds. It was basically Mars, with more water and attitude. And yet, somewhere in that primordial soup, something absolutely miraculous happened. The first spark of life ignited. Now, nobody knows exactly how it happened. I've been debating this for decades, and honestly, it's one of the most mind-bending mysteries in all of science. But somehow, in some warm little pond or deep-sea hydrothermal vent, a collection of chemicals figured out how to make copies of themselves. Just think about that for a second. Dead matter somehow learned to live. That first life form was probably simpler than anything we can imagine today. No eyes, no brain, no movement, just a tiny bubble of chemistry that could reproduce. But here's the incredible part. Every single thing that followed, every dinosaur, every flower, every human being who's ever lived, can trace their lineage back to that first spark. You and I, we're the direct descendants of that ancient chemistry experiment. For the next 3.5 billion years, that's most of Earth's history, our life stayed simple. Really simple. We're talking about single-celled organisms floating around in the oceans, slowly figuring out the basics of existence. They learned how to eat sunlight through photosynthesis, which was actually revolutionary because it started pumping oxygen into the atmosphere. That oxygen was toxic to most early life. It caused what scientists call the Great Oxygenation Event, basically the first mass extinction. But it also set the stage for everything that came next. Then, about 600 million years ago, life exploded, literally exploded in diversity. Scientists call it the Cambrian explosion, and in just 25 million years, is nothing in geological time, life went from simple blobs to creatures with eyes, shells, claws, and the first nervous systems. It's like nature suddenly discovered the instruction manual for building complex bodies and went absolutely wild with it. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's fast forward to the part that really matters for our story. 7 million years ago in Africa, and yes, it was Africa, despite what some old textbooks might have told you, something extraordinary happened. Our ancestors took their first shaky steps upright. Imagine this scene. You're standing in an ancient African landscape, much more lush and green than today's savannas. The climate is changing, forests are shrinking, and our ape-like ancestors are faced with a problem. Food is getting scarcer, and they need to travel longer distances between patches of trees. Some brilliant ancestor, we'll never know who, figured out that walking on 2 legs was more efficient than knuckle walking when you needed to cover long distances. Here's the crazy part. That decision to stand up freed our hands, and those freed hands, they were about to change everything. At first, our ancestors probably just used their hands for carrying food or tools. Simple stuff. But evolution saw those free hands and started thinking big. Really big. Over millions of years, our brains began to grow, our fingers became more dexterous, and we developed the kind of precise grip that lets us thread, needles or type on smartphones. Those hands that are holding your coffee cup or steering wheel right now, they're the direct result of that ancient decision to stand upright. Every text you've ever sent, every tool you've ever used, every work of art ever created, that all traces back to that moment when our ancestors decided to walk tall. But the real game changer came 2 million years ago, and it happened in the most unlikely place you can imagine, around a campfire. Our ancestors discovered fire, not just how to use it when lightning struck a tree, but how to make it, control it, and keep it going. And this discovery, this mastery of fire, changed human evolution in ways that are still blowing scientists' minds today. Here's what fire did to us. It shrank our guts by 60% and grew our brains by the same amount. Think about that for a moment. Before fire, our ancestors had to spend most of their day chewing tough, raw foods. They needed massive jaws, huge grinding, teeth, and enormous digestive systems to break down fibrous plants and raw meat. Their guts were like industrial strength processing plants, working overtime just to extract enough nutrition to survive. But cooking was like having an external stomach, fire pre-digested food, breaking down tough fibers and making nutrients much easier to absorb. Suddenly, our ancestors didn't need those massive digestive systems anymore. Evolution started shrinking our guts and redirecting all that energy somewhere else. Where did it go? Straight to our brains. Brains are incredibly expensive organs to run. Your brain right now is using about 20% of all the energy in your body, despite being only 2% of your body weight. It's like having a Ferrari engine in terms of fuel consumption. Before cooking, our ancestors simply couldn't afford to run big brains. But fire gave them an energy surplus, and evolution invested it in the most sophisticated computer ever created. It wasn't just any evolutionary change. This was the foundation of everything that makes us human. Cooking didn't just change our bodies, it changed our behavior, our social structures, and our relationship with the environment. Families started gathering around fires to share cooked meals. They had to cooperate to keep the fire going. They had to plan ahead to gather fuel. Fire became the center of human social life, and it's still happening today. Every time you turn on your stove or microwave, you're participating in a tradition that's literally 2 million years old. That cooked meal you had for dinner last night, it's connected to the very thing that made our big brains possible in the first place. But we're just getting started with the evolutionary plot twists. About 50,000 years ago, something absolutely revolutionary happened to our species. We developed language. Not just grunts and gestures, full, complex symbolic language that could express abstract thoughts, tell stories, and share knowledge across generations. The key player in this transformation was a gene called FOXP2. Now, I know gene names aren't exactly thrilling, but this one is special. When scientists first discovered FOXP2, they found that tiny mutations in this gene could completely destroy a person's ability to speak. It became known as the language gene, though that's probably an oversimplification. Here's what's mind-blowing. The version of FOXP2 that modern humans carry is different from the version our ancient ancestors had. And that difference? It emerged right around the time that human behavior exploded in complexity. Suddenly, our ancestors were creating art, making sophisticated tools, developing complex societies, and spreading across the entire planet. Language didn't just allow us to communicate, it rewired our brains. It created new neural pathways that could handle abstract thinking, symbolic representation, and complex problem-solving. It's like evolution installed a software upgrade that turned our brains from powerful calculators into creative supercomputers. And then came agriculture, about 10,000 years ago, which changed everything again. For most of human history, we were hunter-gatherers, small groups, constantly moving, living off whatever nature provided. Then some genius figured out that you could plant seeds and grow your own food. This sounds like an obvious improvement, but it was actually one of the most dramatic lifestyle changes in human history. Agriculture allowed us to settle down, build permanent communities, and support much larger populations. But it also created entirely new evolutionary pressures. Our diets changed dramatically. We started eating more grains, more dairy products, more processed foods. Our jaws started shrinking because we didn't need to chew tough wild foods anymore. Our teeth got smaller and more crowded. We developed new diseases because we were living in close proximity to domesticated animals. Smallpox, influenza, plague, HA. These diseases jumped from animals to humans because we started sharing living spaces with cattle, pigs, and chickens. But guess what? Evolution responded by developing genetic resistances to these diseases. Our metabolism changed too. Populations that relied heavily on starchy crops like rice or wheat evolved extra copies of genes that helped digest starch. Some groups developed the ability to digest milk as adults, that lactose tolerance we talked about earlier. Our very DNA was being rewritten by our lifestyle choices. Here's what's fascinating. Every major leap in human development followed the same pattern. Biological change enabled cultural advancement, which then drove more biological change. It's like evolution and culture were dancing together, each one leading and following in turn. Fire led to bigger brains, which led to better tools, which led to more efficient hunting and cooking, which supported even bigger brains. Language allowed complex cooperation, which led to better survival strategies, which rewarded the genetic variants that supported even better language abilities. Agriculture allowed larger populations, which created new diseases and dietary challenges, which drove genetic adaptations that allowed us to thrive in our new lifestyle. Each transformation set the stage for the next one. And here's the incredible part. This process is still happening. We're still in the dance between biology and culture, but now the music is playing faster than ever before. Think about the world our ancestors lived in just a few hundred years ago. Most people never traveled more than a few miles from where they were born. They ate the same basic foods their great-grandparents ate. They faced the same diseases, the same environmental challenges, the same social structures. Now look at today. In a single lifetime, we've gone from horses to space travel. We've created artificial environments that have never existed in Earth's history. We're eating foods from around the world, living in climate-controlled buildings, staring at glowing screens for hours every day, and constantly bombarding our senses with information. Evolution is trying to keep up with all of this, and the results are absolutely fascinating. Your brain is different from your great-grandmother's brain because you grew up with television, computers, and smartphones. Your digestive system might be different because you eat processed foods that didn't exist a century ago. Your immune system is dealing with chemicals and pollutants that are completely novel in evolutionary terms. We're living through what might be the fastest period of human evolution in our species' history, and most of us don't even realize it's happening. But here's what really gets me excited. All of those previous evolutionary leaps, fire, language, agriculture, UC4, they took thousands of years to fully play out. The genetic and cultural changes happened slowly, over dozens of generations. Today's changes are happening in real time. We're not just witnessing evolution, we're participating in it, directing it, and sometimes even consciously choosing it. The 4-billion-year journey from that first spark of life in Earth's primordial soup to you listening to this podcast right now, it's all been leading to this moment. For the first time in the history of life on Earth, a species has become conscious of its own evolution. We understand the mechanisms, we can read the genetic code, we can predict the pressures, and increasingly, we can influence the outcomes. That ancient spark of life that began in a warm pond 4 billion years ago, it's now capable of reshaping itself. We've gone from being products of evolution to becoming partners with it, and that partnership is about to get very, very interesting. Because what's happening inside your body right now, the genetic changes, the adaptations, the evolutionary responses to our modern world, I forty you else. That's not just biology, that's the next chapter in the most incredible story ever told. The story of life itself, learning to direct its own destiny. And we're just getting started. So we've traveled back through 4 billion years of history, and now it's time to zoom back to the present. But here's the thing, and this is going to change how you think about your own body. The present isn't just about what's happening right now. It's about evolution actively rewriting the human instruction manual in real time. Walk through London, Tokyo, or New York, and you're not just seeing people going about their daily lives. You're witnessing evolution's laboratory in action. Every city street is basically a giant petri dish where human genetics are being tested, modified, and upgraded on the fly. Let me tell you about something that's happening in cities right now that would absolutely astound Darwin. City dwellers' brains are literally reshaping themselves. We're talking about physical, structural changes that are visible on brain scans. People who grow up in urban environments have enlarged areas for processing noise and navigation compared to their rural cousins. Think about what your brain has to deal with in a modern city. Constant traffic noise, sirens, construction sounds, thousands of conversations happening simultaneously. Navigation systems that require you to mentally map complex subway systems and remember which of 50 nearly identical skyscrapers contains your destination. Your brain is basically running urban survival software that your great-grandfather never needed. And here's the crazy part. These changes are visible in just 2 generations. 2. Your brain might already be structurally different from your grandmother's in ways that help you navigate the urban jungle. Evolution looked at city living and said, you know what? Let me upgrade your hardware. But it's not just cities. Modern life is creating evolutionary need. Pressures that are completely unprecedented in human history. Remember the DEC2 gene mutation I mentioned earlier? The one that lets some people function perfectly on just 4 hours of sleep? Scientists discovered this in 2009, but they think the mutation itself is much newer. Some families carry this genetic variant, and they're not just getting by on less sleep, they're thriving on it. Here's what's wild. While you're struggling to function after getting 6 or 7 hours of sleep, these people are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed after what most of us would consider a nap. They don't feel tired, they don't show cognitive decline, and they don't seem to suffer any of the health problems we associate with sleep deprivation. Scientists think this mutation emerged as a response to our increasingly busy, always-on modern lifestyle. Think about it. We've created a world where being awake longer gives you significant advantages. More time to work, more time to socialize, more time to learn and adapt. Evolution apparently took notice and started experimenting with the sleep requirements. But sleep isn't the only thing evolution is tinkering with. Let me tell you about something that's happening in West Africa that's going to blow your mind. 1 in 10 people there carry genes that completely block HIV infection. 1 in 10. These aren't treatments or medications. These are genetic variants that make people essentially immune to a virus that has killed millions. The genes work by changing the structure of certain cells so that HIV simply can't get inside. Now, here's what's remarkable about this. HIV only jumped to humans in the early 1900s. The AIDS epidemic really took off in the 1980s. In evolutionary terms, that's nothing. It's like evolution blinked and said, oh, we've got a new threat? Let me work on that. These genetic resistances are spreading through populations as a direct response to a disease that didn't even exist when your great-grandparents were born. Evolution is actively protecting future generations from threats that are newer than jazz music. But evolution isn't just adding new abilities, it's also taking things away, and some of these changes are going to surprise you. We're losing our wisdom teeth. Not just some of us. 35% of people now never grow wisdom teeth at all. Our jaws are shrinking, which sounds harmless until you realize what it's causing. An epidemic of breathing problems, sleep apnea, and crowded teeth that require braces. Why is this happening? Scientists think it's because we've fundamentally changed what we eat. Our food is softer now, more processed, pre-chewed by machines before it ever reaches our mouths. We don't need those massive grinding teeth and powerful jaws that our ancestors used to tear apart tough, fibrous foods. Your breakfast cereal, your sandwich bread, your pasta, they're all soft enough that a child can eat them without difficulty. Compare that to the diet of hunter-gatherers who spent hours every day chewing tough roots, raw vegetables, and meat that hadn't been tenderized by cooking techniques we take for granted. Evolution is basically saying, you don't use it, you lose it. And it's happening fast enough that orthodontists are making a fortune fixing the problems created by our rapidly evolving jaws. But here's something that'll really make you scratch your head. Human body temperature has mysteriously dropped 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit since the 1800s. That's a huge change, and it's happening everywhere scientists look. When doctors in the 1800s said normal body temperature was 98.6 degrees, they weren't just making it up. They measured thousands of people, and that was the average. But when modern doctors measure body temperature, the average is now closer to 97 degrees. Nobody knows exactly why this is happening. Are we becoming more efficient at using energy? Is it related to changes in our gut bacteria? Has our metabolism shifted in response to our modern lifestyle? The jury's still out, but the fact that it's happening at all shows just how active evolution remains. Your body is literally running at a different temperature than your ancestors' bodies. That's not a small change. That's your entire physiology shifting in response to something in our modern environment. And then there's the Framingham study, which is giving us a front-row seat to evolution happening in real time. Researchers have been tracking families in Framingham, Massachusetts, since 1948. That's 70-plus years of data, following the same families through generation after generation. It's one of the longest-running health studies in history, and it's revealed something absolutely incredible. The women in this study are evolving, right before scientists' eyes. Over just 3 generations, these women are becoming shorter and stouter with later menopause. This isn't lifestyle, this is genetic. Evolution is literally selecting for women who have certain traits, and those traits are becoming more common with each generation. The women who are having more children tend to be shorter, have higher body mass indexes, and experience menopause later in life. Their daughters inherit these traits and also tend to have more children. It's natural selection in action, happening fast enough that scientists can measure it within a single long-term study. Let me put this in perspective for you. We're watching human evolution happen at the speed of a human lifetime. Changes that Darwin thought took millions of years are happening in decades. But it's not just individual traits that are changing. Entire populations are evolving in response to their specific environments and lifestyles. Take the Inuit people of the Arctic. They've been living in one of the harshest environments on Earth for thousands of years, and evolution has given them some remarkable adaptations. They have genetic variants that help them process high-fat diets, essential when your traditional foods are mainly seal, whale, and fish. They also have genetic changes that help them maintain body temperature in extreme cold. But here's what's really interesting. As climate change alters the Arctic and traditional lifestyles change, new evolutionary pressures are emerging. Young Inuit people are dealing with different foods, different activity levels, and different environmental challenges than their grandparents. Evolution is responding in real time. Or consider populations living at high altitude. We talked about Tibetans earlier, but they're not the only ones. People living in the Andes Mountains of South America have developed their own set of genetic adaptations to deal with thin air, and populations living in the Ethiopian highlands have yet another set of genetic solutions to the same basic problem. Evolution doesn't just find one solution and stick with it. It's constantly experimenting, trying different approaches to the same challenges. It's like having multiple teams of engineers working on the same problem and coming up with completely different solutions. This is happening everywhere, all the time. Urban populations are developing different traits than rural ones. People in northern climates are evolving differently than those near the equator. Populations with different diets, different disease exposures, and different lifestyles are all on slightly different evolutionary paths, and the pace is accelerating. Modern transportation means that populations that were isolated for thousands of years are now mixing their genes. This creates entirely new combinations of genetic traits that have never existed before. A child today might inherit Arctic adaptations from one parent and tropical adaptations from another, creating genetic combinations that evolution has never had a chance to test. Meanwhile, modern medicine is changing the rules of natural selection. Genetic conditions that would have been fatal just a century ago are now manageable. People with diabetes, heart conditions, and genetic disorders are living full lives and having children. This means genetic variants that might have been eliminated by natural selection are now being passed on to future generations. That's not necessarily bad. Genetic diversity is generally a good thing, but it does mean that evolution is working with a much broader palette of genetic variations than ever before. And then there's the really wild stuff. Scientists are starting to see evidence that our gut bacteria, the trillions of microorganisms living in your digestive system, are evolving even faster than we are. These bacteria are responding to changes in our diet, our environment, and our lifestyle in real time. And since gut bacteria influence everything from mood to immune function to metabolism, their evolution is driving changes in us too. Your gut bacteria are different from your grandparents' gut bacteria. They've evolved to handle processed foods, artificial sweeteners, antibiotics, and a whole host of chemicals that didn't exist a century ago. Some of these changes are beneficial, some are harmful, and most are still too new for us to understand their long-term effects. But here's the thing that really gets me excited about all this. We're not just passive observers of these changes, we're active participants. Every choice you make, where you live, what you eat, how you exercise, what medications you take, who you have children with, all of it influences the evolutionary pressures acting on our species. If you live in a city, you're contributing to the evolutionary pressures that are reshaping urban populations. If you have children later in life, you're part of the trend toward longer reproductive years. If you eat a particular diet, you're influencing the evolution of your gut, bacteria, and potentially passing those changes on to your children. Evolution isn't something that happened to our ancient ancestors. It's something you're participating in right now, today, with every decision you make. And the really mind-blowing part? We're just getting started. Climate change is about to create entirely new evolutionary pressures. Rising sea levels, changing weather patterns, new diseases, different food sources. Evolution will respond to all of it. Populations living near rising seas might develop better salt processing abilities. Those in expanding deserts could evolve more efficient water retention. People dealing with new infectious diseases will develop genetic resistances we can't even imagine yet. Technology is creating pressures that have never existed in the history of life on Earth. What happens when people start spending most of their lives in virtual reality? What new abilities might we develop? What old ones might we lose? And then there's the biggest wild card of all. We're approaching the point where we can consciously direct our own evolution. Gene editing technologies like CRISPR are becoming more precise and more accessible every year. Designer babies might sound like science fiction, but the technology already exists. We're just debating whether and how to use it. For the first time in 4 billion years of life on Earth, a species has the potential to take conscious control of its own evolutionary destiny. Your body isn't just the product of millions of years of evolution. It's evolution's current prototype, being tested and updated in real time. Those changes happening in your brain, your immune system, your metabolism, your genes, they're not just personal. They're humanity's beta test for the future. And that future is arriving faster than anyone expected. November 24th, 1859. Picture London on a cold autumn morning. Charles Darwin is probably pacing nervously around his study, wondering if the world is ready for what he's about to unleash. His publisher, John Murray, has just released a book with the rather lengthy title, On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favoured Races in the Struggle for Life. By the end of that very day, every single copy was sold out. Darwin had spent over 20 years developing his theory, agonizing over every word, knowing that he was about to challenge humanity's most fundamental beliefs about itself. He called it confessing a murder because he knew his ideas would kill the comfortable notion that humans were specially created, separate from the rest of the natural world. But here's the fascinating part. Darwin had no idea how right he was, and he had no idea how wrong he was at the same time. Darwin got the big picture absolutely correct. Species do evolve through natural selection. Humans are indeed part of the same evolutionary tree as every other living thing on Earth. But he missed something huge, something that would have blown his Victorian mind. Darwin thought evolution was basically finished with humans. He figured that once humans developed culture, language, and civilization, we'd essentially stepped outside the realm of natural selection. He thought our big brains and social cooperation had made us immune to evolutionary pressure. In his view, we were evolution's final product, the end of the line. Boy, was he wrong. But you can't blame Darwin for missing this. In 1859, nobody had any idea what DNA was. They didn't know about genes, mutations, or the molecular machinery that drives evolution. They didn't have the tools to detect the kind of rapid evolutionary changes we can measure today. Darwin was working with finches and barnacles, fossils and pigeons. He couldn't peer inside living cells or sequence genomes. He was like a detective trying to solve a murder with only half the clues. The real breakthrough came almost a century later, in 1953, when two relatively unknown scientists named James Watson and Francis Crick figured out something that would change everything: the structure of DNA. Picture this scene. Cambridge University, a cramped laboratory filled with metal models and X-ray crystallography images. Watson and Crick are essentially playing with an incredibly sophisticated Tinker Toy set, trying to figure out how the pieces of DNA fit together. And then they crack it. The double helix. Two long strands twisted around each other like a spiral staircase, with chemical bases paired up in the middle like the rungs of a ladder. It was elegant, it was beautiful, and it was the instruction manual for all life on Earth. Suddenly, evolution wasn't just a theory about how species change over time. It was a detailed mechanical process with specific molecular steps. DNA carries the instructions. Those instructions can change through mutations, and those changes can be passed on to offspring. Evolution had been demystified, turned from a philosophical concept into an engineering problem. But even Watson and Crick couldn't have imagined what their discovery would lead to. Jump forward 50 years to 2003. The Human Genome Project, one of the most ambitious scientific undertakings in history, is finally complete. For the first time ever, scientists have read the entire genetic instruction manual for a human being. All 3 billion letters of DNA code that make up our species. And you know what they found? Something that absolutely stunned everyone. Humans have only about 23,000 genes. 23,000! That's barely more than a microscopic worm. A simple plant has more genes than you do. Rice has more genes than humans. This was supposed to be the era of genetic determinism, where scientists would find the gene for intelligence, the gene for personality, the gene for every human trait. Instead, they discovered that the complexity of human beings couldn't possibly be explained by our genes alone. It turns out that having more genes doesn't make you more complex. It's what you do with the genes you have that matters. Humans have become incredibly sophisticated, not by accumulating more genetic material, but by developing incredibly complex ways of turning genes on and off, combining their effects and modifying their functions. But the real detective story was just beginning. In 2010, scientists achieved something that seemed impossible just a decade earlier. They sequenced the genome of Neanderthals. Not modern Neanderthals. If you're honest, there aren't any. Ancient Neanderthals who died out 30,000 years ago. Think about the technical miracle this represents. Scientists took tiny fragments of degraded DNA from ancient bones and teeth, pieces so small and damaged that they were basically molecular confetti, and somehow reconstructed the entire genetic code of an extinct species. And when they compared Neanderthal DNA to modern human DNA, they discovered something that changed everything we thought we knew about human evolution. If you're of European or Asian descent, you're part Neanderthal. About 2 to 4% of your DNA came from Neanderthal ancestors who lived tens of thousands of years ago. Your immune system, your skin color, your hair texture, even your risk for certain diseases, all influenced by genetic variants inherited from our ancient cousins. But it gets even wilder. Scientists then sequenced the genome of another extinct human species called Denisovans, known only from a few fragments of bone found in a Siberian cave. And guess what? Melanesians, people from Papua New Guinea and nearby islands, carry about 6% Denisovan DNA. 6%. That's not just a trace amount. That's a significant chunk of their genetic heritage, coming from a species we didn't even know existed until recently. And then came the really mind-blowing discovery. When scientists looked at African populations, the groups that never left Africa and therefore never encountered Neanderthals or Denisovans, they found evidence of genetic mixing with unknown extinct human species. Species we haven't discovered yet, maybe species we'll never discover, but whose genetic legacy lives on in modern Africans. Evolution wasn't just ongoing, it was a wild genetic party where ancient guests kept showing up in our DNA. But here's where the detective story gets really interesting. All of this mixing, all of these ancient genetic contributions, they weren't just random historical footnotes, they're actively shaping human evolution today. Some of the Neanderthal genes that Europeans and Asians carry are involved in immune function. These ancient genetic variants help modern people fight off diseases that their purely modern human ancestors couldn't handle as well. Evolution essentially borrowed tricks from an extinct species to help living people survive. Other Neanderthal genes influence skin and hair color, helping people adapt to the different amounts of sunlight in northern latitudes. Still others affect metabolism, pain perception, and even depression risk. The Denisovan genes in Melanesians include variants that help with high-altitude adaptation. Some Pacific Islander populations live at considerable elevation, and their Denisovan heritage gives them genetic tools for dealing with thin air that pure modern humans don't have. Evolution isn't just about new mutations arising in modern populations. It's also about mixing and matching genetic solutions that were developed by different human species over hundreds of thousands of years. We're like a jazz band, where evolution is constantly improvising with themes developed by musicians who've been gone for millennia. And the detective work is far from over. Every year, scientists are discovering new pieces of the human evolution puzzle. They're finding evidence of additional extinct human species that contributed to modern genomes. They're uncovering genetic variants that arose recently in response to agriculture, disease, or environmental changes. They're tracking how modern genetic variants are spreading through populations in real time. In 2019, scientists discovered that some people carry genetic variants that make them resistant to Alzheimer's disease. These variants are incredibly rare, but they're providing clues about how evolution might be responding to the fact that humans are living much longer than our ancestors did. In 2020, researchers found genetic variants that influence COVID-19 severity. some inherited from Neanderthals. Ancient genetic differences were literally determining who got sicker during a pandemic caused by a virus that didn't exist until this century. The detective story of human evolution is being written in real time, and every new discovery reveals how much more complex and active the process is than anyone imagined. But here's what really gets me excited about this whole story. We've gone from Darwin's educated guesses based on fossils and finches to being able to track individual genetic changes as they spread through living populations. Scientists can now predict which genetic variants are likely to become more common in the future. They can identify populations that are under strong evolutionary pressure. They can even see evolution responding to brand new challenges like climate change, urbanization, and modern diseases. We've become evolution detectives with incredibly sophisticated tools. We can analyze ancient DNA, track modern genetic changes, and even predict future evolutionary trends. The mystery that fascinated Darwin is being solved in incredible detail, and the solution is far more amazing than he ever imagined. Evolution didn't stop with humans. It shifted into high gear. The same molecular processes that turned the first spark of life into the incredible diversity of species on Earth are still running at full speed inside every human on the planet. But now, for the first time in the history of life, the species being shaped by evolution is also the species studying evolution. We're simultaneously the detectives and the evidence, the observers and the observed, the scientists and the experiment. And that dual role is about to become incredibly important, because the next chapter of human evolution isn't just going to be shaped by natural forces. It's going to be shaped by conscious choices made by people who understand exactly how evolution works. The detective story is turning into a planning session. We've figured out how the system works, and now we get to decide what we want to do with that knowledge. Darwin thought humans had stepped outside of evolution. He was wrong, we've stepped into the driver's seat. And that changes everything about what comes next. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine it's the year 2100. Where do you think humans will be living? Sure, there will still be billions of us on Earth, but picture this. There are permanent colonies on Mars, underwater cities in Earth's oceans, and research stations floating in the clouds of Venus. Now here's the wild part. The humans living in these places won't just have different addresses. They'll be genetically different, physically different. There'll be new kinds of humans, shaped by evolution to thrive in environments that don't exist anywhere on Earth. Let's start with Mars, because that's probably going to be humanity's first major off-world home. By 2100, there could be tens of thousands of people living on the red planet. They'll be dealing with gravity that's 3.7 times weaker than Earth's. Think about what that means for a moment. Every step they take, every movement they make, requires completely different muscle and bone development than what works on Earth. Within just 10 generations, that's only a few hundred years, evolution will likely start reshaping these Martian colonists in remarkable ways. Their bones will probably thicken to deal with the reduced gravitational stress. On Earth, your bones are constantly working against gravity, which keeps them strong and dense. But on Mars, that constant pressure is much weaker. Evolution will likely respond by developing bones that are structured differently, possibly thicker but also lighter, optimized for a low-gravity environment. Their hearts might actually shrink. Here on Earth, your heart has to pump blood against the full force of gravity to get it up to your brain. On Mars, that job is much easier. Over generations, Martian hearts will probably become more efficient but smaller, designed for a world where pumping blood requires less force, and their blood, it'll likely carry more oxygen. Mars has a much thinner atmosphere than Earth, and even with enclosed habitats, the people living there will be dealing with different atmospheric pressures and oxygen levels. Evolution will probably respond by increasing red blood cell production and efficiency, similar to what happened with high-altitude populations on Earth, but even more extreme. But here's where it gets really interesting. These aren't just individual adaptations. They're the beginning of what could become genuine human subspecies. Imagine that in 300 years, a person born on Mars visits Earth for the first time. They might be taller and leaner because of the low gravity they grew up in. Their bones might be structured so differently that Earth's heavy gravity makes them feel incredibly sluggish and uncomfortable. Their cardiovascular system might struggle with our dense atmosphere. Meanwhile, an Earth person visiting Mars might feel like they're bouncing around like a ping-pong ball, unable to control their movements in the weak gravity, while their heart works overtime trying to pump blood in an environment it wasn't designed for. We could literally be looking at the beginning of Martians and Earthlings as distinct types of humans. But Mars is just the beginning. Picture underwater cities in Earth's oceans. Humans living there for generations would face completely different evolutionary pressures. Higher atmospheric pressure, different oxygen levels, constant humidity, and the need to hold their breath for extended periods during emergencies. Evolution might respond by developing more efficient lungs, better pressure tolerance, and improved underwater vision. These underwater humans might develop larger lung capacity, more flexible rib cages, and enhanced ability to process gases under pressure. Or consider humans living in the Arctic as climate change makes some northern regions more habitable. They might evolve enhanced cold tolerance, different fat distribution patterns, and improved vitamin D synthesis to deal with long periods of darkness. And that's just the natural evolution stuff. The really wild possibilities come when we add technology into the mix. CRISPR gene editing technology, which has been available since 2012, is becoming more precise and more powerful every year. By 2100, genetic modification could be as routine as vaccination is today. Parents might be able to choose their children's traits like options on a car, enhanced intelligence, perfect disease resistance, improved physical abilities, even aesthetic preferences like eye color or height. We could literally design our descendants. But here's where it gets complicated. What happens when some families can afford genetic enhancements and others can't? We could end up with genetic inequality that makes today's economic inequality look trivial by comparison. Imagine a world where some people have genetically enhanced intelligence that makes them 50% smarter than average, where some families have genetic modifications that make their children immune to cancer, heart disease, and aging-related decline, where others have enhanced physical abilities that make them faster, stronger, and more resilient than unmodified humans. We could split into multiple human species based not on geography or environment, but on access to genetic technology. And then there are the environmental pressures that climate change will create. Rising sea levels will put evolutionary pressure on coastal populations. People whose ancestors can better process salt water, handle humidity, and resist waterborne diseases will have survival advantages. Over generations, these populations might develop enhanced kidney function for processing salt, better resistance to fungal infections from constant moisture, and improved heat tolerance. Meanwhile, expanding deserts will drive rapid evolution in other directions. Populations dealing with extreme heat and water scarcity could evolve more efficient water retention, better heat tolerance, and enhanced ability to extract nutrients from limited food sources. New infectious diseases will also drive genetic changes. Climate change is already causing diseases to spread to new geographic areas where populations have no previous exposure. Evolution will respond by developing new genetic resistances, but the process could take generations and cause enormous suffering in the meantime. But the biggest wildcard is probably brain-computer interfaces. These devices are arriving much sooner than most people think, probably by 2030. Direct neural connections between human brains and computers could trigger evolution of entirely new neural pathways. Imagine humans who can think at computer speeds because their brains have evolved to interface directly with digital processors. People who can access the internet with their thoughts, communicate telepathically through digital networks, and process information at rates that make today's humans seem incredibly slow. These enhanced humans might develop new brain structures optimized for digital communication. Their neurons might evolve to handle both biological and digital signals. Their memory systems might integrate seamlessly with external digital storage. Within a few generations, these brain-computer hybrids might be so different from baseline humans that they're essentially a new species. Scientists are predicting 3 possible futures for human evolution, and the fascinating thing is that all 3 might happen simultaneously. First, we could merge with machines, becoming a cyborg species where the line between human and artificial intelligence disappears completely. These humans would have enhanced cognitive abilities, perfect memory, and the ability to upgrade their mental capabilities like software updates. Second, we could split into multiple human species based on environment and technology access. Martians, underwater dwellers, Arctic humans, genetically enhanced humans, and baseline humans might all develop along different evolutionary paths until they're as different from each other as modern humans are from Neanderthals. Third, we could take full control of our evolution, ending natural selection entirely. Instead of letting random mutations and environmental pressures shape our species, we could consciously design every aspect of human development. Evolution would become a deliberate engineering project rather than a natural process. The twist? All 3 scenarios might happen simultaneously in different human populations. Some groups might choose to merge with artificial intelligence, becoming post-human cyborgs. Others might prefer to maintain a more biological existence while still using genetic engineering to enhance desirable traits. Still others might choose to preserve baseline humanity exactly as it is today. And then there are the environments that will create completely new evolutionary pressures. Space habitats with artificial gravity could select for humans adapted to rotating environments. Deep space explorers on generation ships might evolve for life in completely enclosed artificial ecosystems. Humans living on asteroids or space stations might develop enhanced radiation resistance and improved bone density for zero-gravity environments. Virtual reality could create selection pressures that don't exist anywhere in nature. If humans start spending most of their lives in digital environments, evolution might respond by optimizing our brains for virtual interaction while de-emphasizing physical capabilities. Artificial intelligence could become an evolutionary pressure itself. As AI becomes more sophisticated, humans who can best cooperate with artificial intelligences might have survival advantages. We might evolve enhanced abilities to communicate with machines, understand digital systems, and function in AI-augmented environments. But here's what really excites me about all of this. Unlike every previous phase of Krufer, human evolution, we get to participate in the planning process. For 4 billion years, evolution was a blind process, driven by random mutations and environmental pressures. Species evolved without any understanding of what was happening to them or why. Humans are the first species in Earth's history that understands evolution well enough to potentially direct it. We can predict pressures, design solutions, and even choose our evolutionary path. That's an incredible responsibility and an incredible opportunity. The choices we make in the next few decades about genetic engineering, space colonization, artificial intelligence, and environmental protection will literally determine what kinds of humans exist in the future. We're not just deciding policy, we're deciding what our species becomes. Your children or grandchildren might live to see the first genetically enhanced humans, the first Mars-born humans, or the first brain-computer hybrids. They might witness the beginning of human speciation or the end of natural selection as we've known it. We're standing at the threshold of the most dramatic transformation in human evolution since our ancestors first developed language 50,000 years ago. But this time, instead of evolution happening to us, we're becoming conscious partners in the process. The question isn't whether human evolution will continue. It absolutely will, probably faster than ever before. The question is what we'll choose to become and whether we'll have the wisdom to make good choices about our own future. Tomorrow's humans are being designed today in research labs and space agencies and biotech companies around the world. The decisions being made right now about what's ethical, what's safe, and what's desirable will echo through countless generations of our descendants. Evolution has spent 4 billion years creating a species capable of understanding and directing its own development. Now that species, us, gets to decide what D4 comes next. That might be the most remarkable achievement in the history of life on Earth, and we're just getting started. So we've talked about evolution on Mars, the future of human subspecies, and brain-computer interfaces. But let me bring this back down to Earth for a moment, because understanding evolution isn't just about fascinating science or far-future speculation. It's about your life, right now, today. Walk into your bathroom and look at your medicine cabinet. Those bottles of pills, those prescription medications, that pain reliever you take for headaches, they're all clues to ongoing human evolution. And here's something that might surprise you. Why do some people need 10 times more pain medication than others to get the same relief? Evolution. There's a gene called CYP2D6 that comes in over 100 different varieties. 100. This gene controls how your liver processes certain medications, and the version you inherited from your parents determines whether you're a rapid metabolizer, a slow metabolizer, or something in between. If you're a rapid metabolizer, standard doses of many medications might barely affect you. You'll metabolize the drugs so quickly that they're out of your system before they can do much good. If you're a slow metabolizer, that same standard dose might knock you flat because your body takes forever to break down the medication. This isn't just about convenience. It can be life or death. Some people have died from what should have been safe doses of medication because their genetic variants processed the drugs too slowly. Others have suffered needlessly because standard doses were metabolized too quickly to provide relief. Evolution created this incredible diversity in drug metabolism as populations adapted to different environments and diets over thousands of years. What was once an adaptation to local foods and environmental toxins is now determining how you respond to modern medications. Your doctor probably doesn't test your CYP2D6 variants before prescribing medication, but in the future, genetic testing before prescribing drugs will probably be as routine as checking your blood pressure. We're moving toward personalized medicine based on your individual evolutionary history. But evolution isn't just affecting your medicine cabinet. AGE, it's shaping your love life too. You know that mysterious thing called chemistry that you feel with some people but not others? That instant attraction or repulsion that seems to come from nowhere? Evolution is playing a huge role in those feelings. Studies show that women can unconsciously smell genetic compatibility. Your immune system genes produce unique scent signatures, and women's brains are wired to prefer the scent of men with different immune system genes from their own. Why would evolution do this? Because children born to parents with different immune system genes have more diverse disease resistance. Your ancestors, who were attracted to genetically compatible partners, had children who survived diseases better, so evolution wired those preferences into your brain. That guy who seems really attractive on paper, but something just feels off when you're near him. That woman who's absolutely perfect for you logically, but you feel zero chemistry. Evolution might be telling you that your immune systems are too similar for optimal offspring. Of course, attraction is much more complex than just genetics. But it's fascinating to know that part of what you experience as romantic chemistry is actually your evolutionary biology running a genetic compatibility check. And evolution doesn't stop influencing your life once you have children. The stress you experience during pregnancy can literally alter your child's gene expression for generations through a process called epigenetics. Here's how it works. Your genes are like a cookbook, but epigenetics determines which recipes get used. Stressful experiences during pregnancy can add chemical tags to certain genes that change how they're expressed in your child, and some of these changes can be passed on to your grandchildren. If you're pregnant during a time of food scarcity, your child might be born with genetic settings that favor storing fat and conserving energy. If you're pregnant during a time of high stress, your child might have genetic settings that make them more anxious, but also more alert to danger. This means that your life experiences aren't just affecting you, they're potentially influencing the genetics of your descendants. Evolution isn't just about changes that take thousands of years. It's about how your environment today is shaping the genetic expression of future generations. Even your diet is triggering evolutionary responses in real time. Populations that eat high-starch diets have evolved extra copies of the amylase gene, which helps digest starchy foods. People whose ancestors ate lots of rice, wheat, or potatoes have multiple copies of this gene, while populations that traditionally ate low-starch diets might have only one copy. If you come from a family that traditionally ate a high-starch diet, you can probably handle pasta, bread, and rice much better than someone whose ancestors were traditionally hunters or herders. Your evolutionary history is literally determining how well your body processes your lunch. And this is happening fast. Some populations have evolved additional amylase gene copies in just the last few thousand years in response to agricultural diets. Evolution is actively helping humans adapt to the foods we've chosen to cultivate, but it's not just traditional foods. Modern processed foods are creating new evolutionary pressures that we're only beginning to understand. High fructose corn syrup, artificial sweeteners, preservatives, and other modern food additives didn't exist until very recently in evolutionary terms. Your gut bacteria are evolving to handle these new substances, and those bacterial changes are influencing your metabolism, your immune system, and even your mood. Some people seem to handle processed foods just fine, while others develop metabolic problems, digestive issues, or autoimmune conditions. Part of this difference is probably evolutionary. Remember, some people's genetic variants and gut bacteria are better adapted to modern diets than others. We're essentially running a giant evolutionary experiment with our food supply, and your body is one of the test subjects. Your exercise routine is also activating evolutionary responses. Intense physical training can turn on ancient genes that helped your ancestors survive famines and physical challenges. When you push your body through challenging workouts, you're activating genetic pathways that were designed to help humans survive in harsh environments. Some people respond to exercise by building muscle quickly and efficiently. Others seem to struggle to see results despite consistent effort. Part of this difference is evolutionary. Color, your ancestors' lifestyle, shaped which genetic variants you inherited for muscle development, fat storage, and athletic performance. If your ancestors were endurance hunters who chased animals across long distances, you might be genetically wired for cardiovascular fitness and lean muscle. If your ancestors lived in environments where food was scarce and physical strength was crucial for survival, you might be genetically wired to build muscle quickly, but also to store fat efficiently. Understanding your evolutionary background won't completely determine your fitness results, but it can help you choose exercise routines that work with your genetics rather than against them. Even your sleep patterns are influenced by evolution. Remember that DEC2 gene mutation that lets some people function on just 4 hours of sleep? Most of us carry the standard version of this gene, which means we need 7 to 9 hours of sleep for optimal function. But there are other genetic variants that influence whether you're a morning person or a night owl, how deeply you sleep, and how much sleep you need. Your chronotype, whether you're naturally an early bird or a night owl, is partly determined by genetic variants that evolved to help human communities maintain watch throughout the night. Having some people who were naturally alert in the early morning and others who stayed sharp late at night gave our ancestors a survival advantage. In our modern world of artificial lighting and flexible schedules, these ancient sleep genetics can create problems. Night owls, forced to wake up early for work, are fighting against their evolutionary biology. Early birds trying to stay up late are doing the same thing. Understanding your genetic sleep patterns can help you structure your life in ways that work with your biology rather than against it. And then there's stress, which triggers some of the most ancient evolutionary responses in your body. When you're stressed, your body activates the same genetic pathways that helped your ancestors survive immediate physical threats. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, stress hormones flood your system, and your immune function shifts into emergency mode. This response was perfect for dealing with lions or hostile neighbors. It's less helpful for dealing with traffic jams, work deadlines, or social media drama. But your genes don't know the difference. They're still running the same emergency protocols your ancestors developed for life or death situations. Chronic stress in modern life is essentially hijacking your evolutionary emergency systems and running them constantly. This can lead to all sorts of health problems, from heart disease to depression to autoimmune disorders. But here's the interesting part. Some people seem much better at handling modern stress than others. Part of this difference is probably evolutionary. Populations that faced different types of challenges over thousands of years evolved different stress response systems. Some genetic variants help you recover quickly from acute stress, but might make you vulnerable to chronic stress. Others help you handle long-term pressure, but might make you overreact to sudden challenges. Understanding evolution won't solve all your stress problems, but it can help you recognize that your stress responses aren't personal failures. They're ancient biological systems trying to cope with modern challenges. So, what does all this mean for how you live your life? First, it means that many of the differences between you and other people aren't just personal preferences or character traits, they're evolutionary adaptations. Your friend who never seems to get sick, your colleague who functions perfectly on 5 hours of sleep, your neighbor who can eat anything without gaining weight, they might have inherited genetic variants that you don't have. This doesn't mean genetics determines everything about your health and behavior. Lifestyle choices, environment, and personal decisions still matter enormously, but understanding your evolutionary background can help you make better choices about diet, exercise, sleep, stress management, and medical care. Second, it means that normal human variation is much broader than most people realize. There isn't one optimal human diet, sleep schedule, or exercise routine that works for everyone. Evolution created incredible diversity in human biology, and that diversity means different approaches will work better for different people. Third, it means that your health decisions aren't just affecting you, they're potentially influencing future generations through epigenetic changes. The lifestyle choices you make today could alter gene expression in your children and grandchildren. And finally, it means that you're participating in human evolution right now, whether you realize it or not. Every choice you make about where to live, who to have children with, what to eat, and how to live is contributing to the evolutionary pressures shaping our species. Evolution isn't something that happened to your ancient ancestors. It's something you're part of every day. Understanding that process, understanding your own evolutionary story, isn't just intellectually fascinating. It's practical knowledge that can help you live a healthier, happier, more fulfilling life. You're not just a random collection of traits that happen to end up in one person. You're the current expression of 4 billion years of evolutionary experimentation, carrying genetic solutions that helped countless generations of your ancestors survive and thrive. That's your user manual for life. And the more you understand it, the better you can use it. So, here we are, at the end of our journey through the most incredible story ever told. But this isn't really an ending, It's the beginning of the most remarkable chapter in the history of life on Earth. For 3.8 billion years, evolution worked blindly, randomly, unconsciously. Mutations appeared by chance, environmental pressures selected winners and losers, and species rose and fell without any understanding of what was happening to them. Life was like a blind architect, building incredible structures without blueprints, creating masterpieces without intention, solving engineering problems without awareness that there were problems to solve. And then, 50,000 years ago, something unprecedented happened. Consciousness emerged. For the first time in the history of life on Earth, a species became aware of itself. Humans developed the ability to think about thinking, to observe their own behavior, to imagine possibilities that didn't yet exist. But consciousness was just the beginning. 200 years ago, we discovered evolution. Charles Darwin and his contemporaries figured out that species weren't fixed and eternal. They changed over time through natural processes that could be understood and studied. 60 years ago, we decoded DNA. Watson and Crick revealed the molecular machinery that drives evolution, turning it from a mysterious force into a mechanical process with specific steps and predictable outcomes. And today, we can edit genes like text documents. CRISPR technology, available since 2012, allows scientists to make precise changes to DNA in living organisms. We can add genes, remove genes, and modify genetic instructions with unprecedented accuracy. Think about what this means. Humanity has become evolution aware of itself. We've figured out how the system works, and now we've grabbed the steering wheel. This is the ultimate plot twist in the story of life. For nearly 4 billion years, evolution was something that happened to species. Now it's something that one species can consciously direct. But the story gets even stranger when you really think about what's happening. Culture is now evolving faster than biology, creating selection pressures that have never existed before and couldn't possibly have been predicted. Social media was invented in 2004. That's less than 20 years ago, yet it's already showing signs of rewiring human attention spans, social bonding patterns, and even how we form memories. We're creating new neurological pathways optimized for processing rapid-fire information, managing multiple simultaneous conversations, and navigating complex online social hierarchies. Young people today are developing brains that are structurally different from their parents' brains because they grew up with smartphones and social media. These aren't just behavioral changes, they're physical changes in neural development, and social media is just the beginning. Virtual reality is about to create evolutionary pressures that don't exist anywhere in nature. Imagine humans who spend most of their lives in virtual worlds. What new abilities might they develop? Enhanced spatial reasoning for navigating three-dimensional virtual environments, improved hand-eye coordination for manipulating digital objects, new forms of memory optimized for storing experiences that never physically happened. Or consider how artificial intelligence is already becoming an evolutionary pressure. As AI systems become more sophisticated, humans who can best cooperate with artificial intelligences will have significant advantages in education, employment, and problem-solving. We might evolve enhanced abilities to communicate with machines, improved pattern recognition for understanding AI decision-making, and new forms of creativity that complement rather than compete with artificial intelligence. These aren't science fiction scenarios. They're evolutionary pressures that are already beginning to shape human development. But here's where it gets really mind-bending. We're approaching a point where the speed of cultural rise, evolution might completely outpace biological evolution. Biological evolution, even at its fastest, takes generations to produce meaningful changes, but cultural evolution can happen in years, months, or even days. New technologies, new social norms, and new environmental challenges are emerging faster than our genes can possibly respond. This creates a fascinating paradox. We have the tools to consciously direct our biological evolution, but our culture is changing so rapidly that we might not have time to figure out what biological changes we actually want to make. It's like being handed the controls to evolution just as the whole system shifts into hyperdrive. And that brings us to the biggest question of all. What do we want to become? For 4 billion years, this question never existed. Species became whatever random mutations and environmental pressures made them become. There was no choice, no planning, no conscious decision-making involved. But now we get to choose. We can decide what traits to enhance, what problems to solve, and what new capabilities to develop. We can choose whether to remain a single species or split into multiple specialized subspecies. We can choose whether to merge with artificial intelligence or maintain our biological independence. We can even choose whether to continue evolving at all or to lock in our current form and focus on cultural rather than biological development. These aren't decisions that will be made by scientists in laboratories or politicians in government buildings. They're decisions that will be made by millions of individuals making personal choices about their own lives and their own children. Every time parents choose to use genetic screening to prevent genetic diseases, they're participating in directed evolution. Every time someone moves to a new environment, chooses a romantic partner, or decides when to have children, they're influencing evolutionary pressures. Every technological innovation, every medical breakthrough, and every cultural shift creates new selection pressures that will shape the future of our species. We've transitioned from being evolution's passive subjects to being its active partners. But partnership requires wisdom, and that's where things get complicated. Evolution has been operating successfully for billions of years through trial and error. Random mutations create genetic variants, environmental pressures test those variants, and successful innovations spread through populations. It's a slow process, but it's incredibly thorough. Human-directed evolution will be much faster, but will it be as wise? We're trying to compress billions of years of trial and error into decades of conscious planning. That's an enormous responsibility, and we're still learning how to handle it. Consider some of the choices we're already facing. Should we eliminate genetic diseases through gene editing? That sounds like an obvious yes. But some genetic variants that cause problems in one context provide advantages in another. The gene variant that causes sickle cell anemia also provides resistance to malaria. Eliminating the disease might also eliminate the protection. Should we enhance human intelligence through genetic modification? Again, that might sound obvious, but what kind of intelligence? There are many different types of cognitive abilities, and enhancing some might come at the cost of others. Should we genetically adapt humans for life in space, underwater, or in other extreme environments? That could enable incredible expansion of human civilization, but it might also create permanent genetic divisions between different human populations. These are the kinds of decisions that evolution used to make through random experimentation over thousands of generations. Now we're trying to make them through conscious planning in just a few decades. And here's the thing that really keeps me up at night thinking about all this. We're not just making these decisions for ourselves. We're making them for every generation of humans who will come after us. The genetic modifications we choose today will be inherited by our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren for countless generations. The evolutionary path we set our species on will influence the development of human civilization for thousands or millions of years. We've become the first species in Earth's history that can consciously shape its own future, but we're also the first species that has to live with the consequences of those conscious choices. It's simultaneously the most exciting and the most terrifying responsibility any species has ever faced. But here's what gives me hope about all this. Evolution has spent 4 billion years creating a species capable of understanding and directing its own development. That's us. We're evolution's greatest achievement precisely because we can take conscious control of the process. We have something that no other species in Earth's history has ever had: the ability to learn from our mistakes before they become permanent. We can test genetic modifications in laboratory settings before applying them to human populations. We can model the long-term consequences of different evolutionary paths. We can make decisions based on evidence, ethics, and wisdom, rather than just random chance. We're not perfect at this yet. We're still learning how to use these incredible tools responsibly. But we're the product of 4 billion years of evolutionary problem solving, and that gives us pretty good instincts for figuring things out. The story of evolution is ultimately a story about problem solving. Life faced the problem of survival in a hostile universe and solved it through reproduction. Early organisms faced the problem of energy and solved it through photosynthesis. Complex life faced the problem of coordination and solved it through nervous systems. Humans faced the problem of environmental challenges and solved it through tool use, language, and culture. Now we face the problem of consciously directing our own evolution, and I believe we'll solve that too. The 4 billion-year-old mechanism that created us is now awaiting our commands. Evolution, the force that shaped every living thing on Earth, is ready to become our partner in creating whatever we choose to become. That might be the most remarkable development in the history of life itself. So what will we choose? What kind of humans do we want to create? What problems do we want to solve? What new abilities do we want to develop? What kind of future do we want to build? These are the questions that will define the next chapter of human evolution. And unlike every previous chapter in the story of life, this one will be written consciously, deliberately, and with full awareness of what we're creating. We stand at the threshold where evolution transforms from an unconscious process to a conscious choice. The blind architect has opened its eyes, learned to read blueprints, and picked up new tools. What we build next is entirely up to us. The story of evolution isn't ending. It's just beginning the most incredible chapter yet. And you, right here, right now, listening to this, you're part of writing that chapter. Welcome to the future of human evolution. We're all in this together, and we get to decide what comes next. What an absolutely incredible time to be alive.